3 months is not enough to embed a strategy. And you might get some short-term kind of tactical gains from pursuing tactical excellence, but, a ship doesn't move overnight.
This is Marketing Careers Uncovered, and I'm Dave Hayward. I really don't feel it, but I've been in marketing now for around 16 years, and after a little while, you start to notice some similar patterns popping up time and time again. Plenty of smart people doing really, really great work, but still getting stuck in that marketing equals promotion box, where everyone's busy, reactive, there's some really deep channel expertise, but it's not quite breaking through into the strategic conversations that the teams know they should be a part of. And today I've got an absolutely cracking guest who helps people and teams cross that line. Bethan Vincent is the founder and managing partner of Open Velocity, where she works with tech companies and agencies to put proper marketing strategy on the table. So as we'll hear today, she's run her own businesses, worked in-house, trained agencies, and coached teams with that goal of really making marketing actually matter inside a business. Bethan, why don't you give us a quick hello and a little more on what you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So, hello, everyone. It's fantastic to be here. I run my own marketing strategy consultancy with an amazing team. And we are, plowing on with our great work for clients, what we do day in and day out. We're all ex-marketing directors and CMOs, which I guess, speaks to that strategic expertise we bring to the table. But we're also exploring AI like every other person at the moment. And we're really interested in synthetic audiences and their kind of power to help people test messaging, test concepts into a synthetic variant of their audience based on their audience data. And we're quite excited by that as well, because I think that there's kind of a link we'll probably talk about between strategy and action. And we're really interested in how do you embed your strategy more in the execution, which we think the product we're working on will help solve.
Super duper, can't wait to get into that. But before we start looking at the future, let's just look backwards a little bit. So you've had the textbook definition of a squiggly career back when we first met. If you give us a little bit of a flavour of that, and what was it ultimately that drew you to the bright lights of marketing?
Yeah, sure. So I, oddly enough, and I think this is true of many marketeers, I did medieval history at university. So a subject that has nothing to do with marketing at all, and arguably is not particularly useful in the modern environment. But what it did do, I think, and again, this is what I think a lot of marketeers find, is it taught me how to think. It taught me how to be critical. It taught me how to analyze things, taught me how to write as well and present an argument, which has been very useful. And while I was at university, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my career. Lots of people were going to London to go into banking or government or whatever. And the University of York had an entrepreneurship program. And I only had 4 contact hours a week as well. So I was a bit like, right, I've got loads of spare time. Let's go and learn about setting up and running a business. So I went and did that. And then my summer after graduating, I got some funding from the University of York to set up my first business, which was a coffee wholesaler and retailer. So I built the website, I used Shopify, I did all of the brand identity stuff, which in hindsight is a little bit cringe, but you live and learn. And that really, that business didn't make any money. It's very hard in coffee. The margins are very, very poor. But what it did show me was, I quite like this marketing stuff. And actually, that's the bit I'm good at, not sending invoices and making money, which was, there we are, my problem to solve. So that was my kind of first taste of marketing. And at that time as well, I was running a food blog. And that was when blogging on a website was still the massive thing. Instagram hadn't taken off yet. And so I was kind of building that muscle, that marketing writing muscle and SEO and technical muscle over on that side as well. So it really was a bit of a stumbling across marketing as a discipline.
So what did you do after the coffee business? Did you go and take an in-house role? Did you decide to build something else yourself? How did you make that transition?
Yeah, so I ran out of money and decided I needed a job. So I went and got a marketing assistant job at a university. And that was very, I was the most lowest person in the team, learning from the ground up. And I was responsible for the CRM and managed to email loads of people the wrong email. But anyway, we'll brush over that bit. And that really, that
I've
got
done
me
it. It's
that.
fine.
Yeah, to 20, I think it was 200,000 people. And I was like, whoops, sorry. But my manager there was really good. And she kind of let me sit on meetings that I probably shouldn't have been part of, but I was kind of sat in the corner as an observer. And that was my first kind of, I guess, interface with marketing isn't just writing emails or writing blog posts. It's something more commercial because we were part of the commercial team, the university marketing team.
So what sort of conversations were you part of? And interesting you say you shouldn't have been a part of those conversations. Why do you say that?
I think there's sometimes this perception that junior marketeers are there just to be the kind of workhorses and they need to just crack on and they're not decision makers. They shouldn't even be listening in on the decision making. It really depends on the culture of the organization you're at, right? And I was lucky that this was quite a flat structure. So, while I wasn't necessarily able to contribute to those meetings, I was there and able to listen and absorb. And it was just things around commercial priorities. We only have X amount budget and we've got these targets. What are we going to do to make this happen in this time frame? Again, because it was a very commercially driven department. And I suppose that was kind of enlightening because I was like, oh, it's not just about making things pretty or writing the right thing. We've actually got a job to do here and we're going to be measured on our performance and we're going to be measured by revenue contribution on our performance.
Yeah, and you can only choose between A, B, or C because you can't afford A, B, and C.
Yeah, and I
And
was really lucky. The commercial, so we kind of reported into the commercial director, and he was an extremely astute businessman, probably one of the most astute businessmen I have ever come across. And he was very kind of open to challenge. He was very clear on what we needed to achieve, but also was like, look, you are the creative people, come up with a creative way of doing this. And so we were able to put forward things I think in another department or another organization might have been shot down because he was like, look, like we're all very clear on the goal. How we get there is kind of up to you guys as the experts to tell me to do.
when did it all start to click for you? That view that actually a lot of people are talking about strategy but aren't really doing it. How did you start to come to that worldview?
Yeah, I moved to a different organization still in a kind of marketing adjacent role. And that was very fluffy and I was very unclear on what I was trying to achieve. If I was doing well, that looked like output. They were like, you've sent this amount of emails or done this many posts or written this many things. That's good. And I was sat there thinking, is that good? Because I don't really know whether it's actually contributing to anything. And if my work is important or not. And to be honest, I got extremely frustrated and kind of bored in that role. And that's when I set up my next business, mainly out of kind of frustration, really. I was like, oh, I've learned some marketing things. Let's go and do something else. So I set up a ethical certification accreditation, which was completely random, but there we are.
But yeah, born out of that wanting to do something that has some real value.
Yeah.
So yes, it must have been a really hard transition coming from one organization where you're part of those really knotty commercial conversations, and then you pressed a button and sent some stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah, it was extremely it was dispiriting. And I think, I don't want to be like, I was a very precocious marketeer and, it was amazing, but I was very hungry to learn. And when I was just sat in that box of like, you're writing copy, content, emails and whatever, I was a bit like, that's great, but I can kind of do this with my eyes closed at this point. So can I do something more exciting, basically? And I think a lot of marketeers feel that way. We have we're all generalists to some degree. I know some people are channel specialists, but everyone has a reasonable generalist understanding, and we're just put in these boxes.
Yeah, most of us start out our career in really, really junior roles, and essentially with that mindset of, as you said, come in, deliver, write the copy, press the button, send the emails, crank the handle. So not having the benefit of being involved in a lot of strategic conversations you were involved in first off, but Conversely, the most consistent thing a marketer is told to do when looking for that step up or a promotion is to be more strategic. And it's quite a tricky shift where you haven't really got any frame of reference, right? Going, well, what does it actually really mean to be strategic? Because I've spent my whole life and career thus far judged on my ability to send a bunch of emails out or get a website up and live. I guess what I want to get to is, in your words, what is the difference between strategy and tactics, and why do we get it all mixed up and jumbled up and wrong?
Well, okay, so I think when we talk about strategy, there are also different types of strategy. So you have business strategy, and that is that top level overarching strategic goals of the business. And if as subscribe to Michael Porter's view, there are only 3 strategies businesses can pursue. And this is where I'm going to pull this out the back of my memory and hopefully I get it right. So you can pursue cost leadership. So you can be the cheapest on the market. You're the Primark of your market. Very hard to sustain, I would argue, and you need sufficient volume and scale to do that. You can focus on a particular niche or a particular audience, or you can differentiate. So his argument is that those are the 3 strategies available to businesses. You can't pursue all 3. Some businesses try and pursue 2, but you can't have all 3. So that's the business strategy, and that needs to cascade. And hopefully it's fairly clear how that should cascade into the marketing strategy, which is the overarching principle of how are we going to achieve the business strategy through marketing and customer acquisition and customer retention, with given our constraints. So the constraints are the marketplace, our existing customers and target audience, and our competitors. So there's a whole load of contextual stuff you need to factor in. Notice I am not talking about channels or anything that we would probably some people consider marketing at this point. I am talking about that, I guess, higher level stuff. And I think when you understand where you want to play, with which customers, which audiences, how you're going to win, how you're going to beat competitors, and how you're going to reach your customers, how do you influence on the buy journey, that's the point when you get to your messaging, proposition, positioning, and channel strategy. So again, that's fairly, I don't want to say lower on the pecking order, because all of these things need to happen. They're all equally important, but there is a process and a cascading that needs to happen. When people come and talk to me and say, my marketing strategy for my business is I'm going to send more emails, that is not a strategy. It has none of the components of a strategy. And again, another kind of guru of strategy I love is Richard Rommel, who wrote the book Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And he basically describes strategy as a coherent set of actions that are in response to a set of constraints.
You will have loads and loads of really good examples through your work of businesses and individuals who thought they had a strategy, and actually you've uncovered that really they haven't. Can you talk us through sort of what are the kind of things that you hear and what you challenge and change, and unpick that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I'll give you a client example. So a client in the SaaS space came to us with the challenge was articulated as our PPC is no longer working. So year on year, their conversion rate through PPC, which was their main acquisition channel, had halved. And we were thinking, they'd gone through the process of, is it something technical within the PPC account? And the PPC agency had done all of this great work, kind of basically to come to the conclusion of, no, it is nothing within the account that we've done wrong. It's not a link between the website or the landing pages have gone wrong. There is something else. So that was their question, like, what the hell is going on? And we actually ran a full marketing audit. So we looked at kind of everything they were doing across the board. And the challenge was, not that PPC wasn't working, it was that the competitive landscape had shifted over the year. So a lot more, multiple competitors had entered with a product that was arguably not just at parity with our clients, it was better. So they had effectively a kind of proposition and positioning problem within the business. And that isn't going to be solved by doing more PPC or making more landing pages. That is a fundamental strategic problem. And then that begs the question of what do you do to reimagine the proposition, improve the positioning to become more competitive? And that's the set of recommendations and work we did with them. So hopefully that's a view of how a performance problem can be a strategic. Sometimes it is just that the PPC account is set up wrong, but often these issues we come across in front end channels belie a deeper, more structural issue that we need to resolve. And unless we resolve that, we can't brute force our way through better channel excellence into solving it.
So it's really essentially a reminder that there are 4 Ps in marketing:
Yeah.
price, product, place, promotion, and PPC is very firmly in that promotional bucket. Ignore the other 3 at your peril. How do you actually go around building that strategic judgment? Is it something that you bust out some Porter's strategy textbooks, ingest that, and then go and swan into your organization? Is it something that you do over time? How did you go about getting that nose for what a good and coherent strategy is?
Yeah, I mean, so me personally was thrown into, so my next role after I did the ethical certification and kind of that didn't work out. Well, it kind of did and didn't work out. There was a little bit of a gain from that. I went into a marketing manager role where effectively was heading up the department, and actually I was given by the business a strategic seat at the table, as in they were coming to me with strategic questions, and that forced me, was it birth by fire, whatever the phrase is, it baptism by fire, it was that. And so I was like, oh my God, I kind of knew I'd been promoted to a position that I didn't necessarily have the background knowledge for, but I studied like hell and I read every single marketing strategy book. They were a great company because they actually gave you a stipend to do training, learning, and development. And I did, loads of courses. I've read every book. So I learned the theory, but I was also being forced by the position I was in to apply it in practice. And I think it's got to be the combination of those things. I think you have to have the theoretical baseline and understand the frameworks and the models, because they give you a conceptual way of thinking about these problems. Otherwise, it just feels like messy spaghetti everywhere. But also you need the ability and space to apply them to real world problems. And actually, not to kind of be too self-promotional about it, but this is the kind of reason we set up the agency strategy training. So there is a taught component to it. We're teaching you the frameworks, we're teaching you the models, but we're also in sessions helping you apply them to real world client challenges as well. And I guess reinforcing that kind of muscle memory. And a lot of it is actually knowing the right questions to ask and where to go for answers and kind of probing the business. And you'd be surprised how many, I think, if you think about marketing as one part of the commercial function, how many other parts of that commercial function are waiting for marketing to come and have strategic conversations.
Okay, next up, it's time for a very familiar scenario. So, we've set the strategy, we're going about delivering it. Everything looks great for the first 3 months. And then all of a sudden, the dashboards start nosediving, KPIs are dipping, the pressure really starts ramping up. And all of a sudden, everyone in the business wants to just ditch the strategy. So, when everyone's running around screaming, "Oh, we need to absolutely ditch it," what do you do first? Do you throw it in the bin and do something else, or do you have a slightly different approach?
I want to understand what's actually happening. So when we talk about KPIs, there's a few things I'd want to investigate. So firstly, okay, is it every KPI that's dipped, or is it one or two? Because that again, there's a couple of different things that can be happening. Is it a internal problem, maybe with our execution of the strategy hasn't been correct? We've not done it well enough, but the guiding principles are actually still pretty correct. Our thesis still holds correct. So is it one KPI that's shifted? If it's every KPI we haven't met, that suggests maybe something a bit more fundamental in the strategy, as opposed to there were just a couple of that are red, but we know that's because we didn't have enough people in the SEO team, or, we didn't put enough budget into PPC, whatever, it is. Also, over what time frame have we not met KPIs as well? Because it goes back to that short-termism that seems to be invading marketing at the moment. Is it we've not met our we've set a new strategy and we've not met our KPIs by month 3? 3 months is not enough to embed a strategy. And you might get some short-term kind of tactical gains from pursuing tactical excellence, but, a ship doesn't move overnight. Or is it actually, this is over a period of a year? And again, that suggests something a little bit more fundamental with the strategy that's going on. And then also, back to those external factors, that's really worth thinking about.
Yeah, when we think about strategy, commercial thinking, holding your nerve and slowing things down a little bit while everyone runs around panicking. it's a little bit messier and harder than we all might care to admit. Yeah, I think this is a really helpful reality check as well, and some practical tools and tips that people can use.
Yeah. I mean, if it was that easy, every marketeer would be a millionaire, and ignore those people on LinkedIn who said, this one email trick made me $5 million, because they either got very lucky and found a very small arbitrage window, or they are lying to you. And most people are lying about the figures online. So just crack on, do your best work, focus on you, focus on your business, the business you work for.
Marvelous. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks to you as well for listening. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe for future episodes, leave a review, or share with your friends and colleagues. And we'll see you next time.